Before we get started, I just wanted to give an announcement regarding the Portal Master Sona contest. I know it's been a long time in the making, and I was almost done, but if you follow me on Twitter, you will know when I had to reorganize my computer, my editing software shat itself, and now everything is gone. So I'm restarting, and rather than leaving you guys hanging, because I had wanted to return with that video, I am instead just gonna record one of my normal, usual talkie videos. I know it's not the big grand return we had all been hoping for, but I'd rather do something than leave y'all with just the copious amounts of Genshin live streams that I've been doing. So, with that out of the way, hello single person watching. My name is Scrape, and today I wanted to go over my experience running Yes, I roleplay. Deal with it. So it all kind of... The RP at this point is long dead. There have been a few attempts to revive it, which I will get into. But, so, because it's dead, I feel comfortable talking about it, because I feel like most of the nonsense has passed and probably will never happen again. If I do end up hosting another server, or this one somehow suddenly gets revitalized, I will probably make a part 2, but for now, I just wanted to go over all of the nonsense that happened with it. So it all started when my friend Fizzy on Discord DM'd me and asked if I wanted to co-host. Because from what I remember, they had never hosted a server on their own before, or I don't remember if it was their first roleplay server or if they had hosted ones before, but again, never had anyone to never hosted alone, so they wanted someone to just help moderate and stuff. And they came to me, which I'm genuinely still honored about. And so, of course, I jumped at the opportunity to assist because I love helping people, and roleplay is fun. It was a Skylanders roleplay server, which I probably should have mentioned. It doesn't really have any effect on it. Maybe. Well, at one point it was kind of multi-fandom, but also not. Everything got slightly out of hand. But at the beginning, it was me, Fizzy, one other mod that I believe is there to help set things up, like bots and everything, and then a few people that had either joined through direct links or through the Discord, I believe it's called. So it was a... I don't want to say it was a decently big roleplay server at first, at least big from my experience, and also big because there were a lot of channels. That was one thing that I personally didn't like from the beginning. I understand it was a stylistic choice, and there are many, many different styles of roleplay. For me, I'm used to the kind where you have one channel and you write it more like a book, kind of going back and forth between people. But the one that I had been invited to help moderate was one where each area was a different channel, which is still, to me, seems very cluttered and hard to follow. But it wasn't my server, so I didn't really say anything, because that was how Fizzy had set it up, and I wanted to be as supportive as possible. So I was like, okay, different kind of style of role-playing, I can get behind that, time to learn some new things. And so, we had the, general channels, we had the roleplay-specific channels, and then there was the character submission process, which was just so that Fizzy and I could go over any characters that weren't canon characters that wanted to be submitted, just to make sure that they weren't too overpowered or too, I don't want to say basic, but basically just to help out if anyone needed help with their OCs, or to screen things that could have possibly been quote-unquote problematic, or like if someone submitted an OC that was way too out of left field, because we were attempting to run a family-friendly roleplay server, which, shocker for me, I know. And from what I can remember, because we had a like specific way to submit the character, and it was confusing for a few people, but usually we were able to figure it out. And there have been some instances of people just immediately posting their OCs to the OC list rather than screening them with the mods first, like the rules said, but I chalked that up more to the rules not being clear. And also, I had found throughout the experience of this, a lot of people don't actually read the rules. Shocker. Fascinating. Never would have guessed. Because I have had, like, throughout the course of this roleplay, there had been so many instances of people doing things or asking questions, or like, and asking questions isn't a bad thing. I want to get that out. I'm all for asking questions if you don't understand something. And I guess to me, since I had helped write the rules, it was a little harder for me to understand some of the non-understandings, because I had written them. They made sense to me, but if they didn't make sense to other people, that was an issue with the rules, and my understanding, probably not an issue with them. Or sometimes it was just people being ignorant. And in the roleplay at the beginning, there were 2 specific people that were kind of a problem, and I'm not gonna name drop them, but there was Buzz Lightyear, and there was SCP-087B. I'm gonna start with Buzz Lightyear, because they... very interesting character there. I'm calling them Buzz Lightyear because, from what I can remember, they had a Buzz Lightyear profile picture. Overall, the server was a place for anybody of any caliber of writing. I personally... Oh, there was also someone I'm going to call Spotlight. But starting again with Buzz Lightyear. I guess I'll just call him either Buzz or Lightyear. But starting with Buzz, as I said, there were people from all walks of writing caliber. Some people that liked long paragraphs, some people that would do one-liners, and we had both a rules section and a suggestions section. Rules were stuff you had to stick hard and fast to. Suggestions were things where it's like, if you could do these things, it would help everybody out, but you don't need to. Because from SCP, we'd gotten complaints about me specifically being way too controlling over the roleplay, which I still don't see personally, and talking to Fizzy about it in the moment, they also hadn't seen, but I feel... Now, I might be confusing things, because I feel like both Buzz and SCP did this, where they would... Well, SCP more so, but they would respond with one-liners, which isn't always a bad thing if there isn't much for your character to say in a situation, but when your character is the one carrying a scene, and you respond just with, I walked to the wall, or blank smiled, and nothing more, it really halts the flow of a roleplay, at least in my opinion. And they were notorious for that. And again, I'm not knocking their writing capability, because everyone starts somewhere and everyone is at a different level. Not everyone is going to be pumping out like paragraphs upon paragraphs every response, and that's perfectly fine. So we had a suggestion where if you could write more than one sentence, if possible. Or at least more than, like, 3 words. It would be helpful. And I know Buzz usually did, but SCP, at least at first, had an issue where they would write one message, or write one response, wait like a minute, and then write another response to their response, rather than all putting it in one message, which was getting very confusing for a lot of people. Mainly me, and I think a few others. So I attempted to confront them about it, and that's where the whole me being controlling thing came from, I believe. Again, it's been a while. The server got rebooted, so I don't have any screenshots or anything from it, because I hadn't planned on making this video. But I remember that being a issue that was brought up in the beginning. I was going to talk about Buzz, and I got distracted. But going back to Buzz, their writing style was very straight to the point. No, like, descriptions, no flowery language, I guess you could say. And from what I can remember, they wrote in the style of character name, semicolon, or colon, talking not in quotations, and actions in asterisks, or in brackets. Which, again, we allowed anyone of any style or writing caliber to join. But it did get confusing sometimes. And also, when they submitted their character, rather than following the blank bio we had given to submit, or even just copy-pasting it into Discord, they just sent a link to a Google Doc, which, like, and this is a very, very, like, minor gripe. There were a lot more things wrong with this dude, but it comes across as lazy, or like you don't want to give the time or effort to just copy-paste it into Discord. Like, okay, here, just have a link, read it. Okay. And again, that just could be a personal thing for me specifically. And overall, an interesting character. He gave me some bad vibes occasionally, but I didn't think too much of it. That was until one day, Fizzy got a DM from one of the other members, I believe, or from someone they knew specifically, which was, in regards to Buzz. It turns out Buzz had been attempting to engage with minors in ERP. Where, if you don't know what ERP is, basically, not safe for work roleplays, which, between consenting adults, is perfectly fine, but between someone who, from context clues we gained, was an adult, attempting to engage with minors, that was a no-no. And, like, it wasn't just word of mouth, they had screenshots to prove it. And especially because the person, Buzz, had mentioned in DMs with another person that they had previously gone by a username that had been known for doing that as well. So it was, they were out of there immediately. And kind of from there, things started going downhill. Moving on to SCP a little more specifically, nothing as egregious as attempting to sexually DM minors. SCP had not confronted, but been wiggy about me being controlling over the roleplay in the past, because I had asked politely for them to maybe consider doing a few things to make the readability and engagement of the roleplay easier for other people. As far as I can remember, I I think at first I was, but then they switched to a different roleplay. Like, because there were two going on at the time. I forget if I mentioned this already or not, but there was the one I was hosting, which was the quote-unquote main storyline of the roleplay at the time. And then there was the side story that was being hosted. And I believe he started out in the main story and then switched to the side story before up and leaving. But that was a total other can of worms. I don't remember if it was before or after, but in the rules I had specifically mentioned not to DM members unless they had stated it was okay, and to attempt to keep all talk of the roleplay to the server itself. Again, unless members were okay with DMs. It was mainly so that, like, I personally, if we didn't talk about it prior, am not okay with random DMs from people. And especially if it's about the roleplay, because I'm like, this isn't where this is supposed to go, please keep it in the server. Especially so that the other mods would also be able to see it in case there was stuff going on. And I do have receipts for this. I don't know if I'm going to show any of them, but just in case I need to refresh my memory. I had been DM'd on multiple occasions from SCP, asking about specific stuff for the roleplay, and every time I would mention as politely as I could you please keep this to the server? I would answer their question, but I would also say, hey, can we try to keep conversations like this to the server so that not just me, but other members can try to help out as well. And there was at one point where SCP got mad at another member, Spotlight, for not understanding a reference that they had made to Sonic.exe in the roleplay that Spotlight wasn't even a part of, because Spotlight was part of the main storyline, and SCP was in the secondary storyline at that point, and was getting all up at arms that nobody understood the reference, even though Spotlight did understand the reference, and it didn't even involve them. And I don't remember if that was before or after the first time that they left and came back, but they did that quite a few times. Where they left the server, came back, left the server, came back. And they were the first one to use a non-Skylanders related character, I believe. I could be wrong on that though, because as their name suggests, they wanted to use SCPs as characters, which we allowed even though it was a family-friendly roleplay. Even though there were SCPs that were more on the edgy side, which, nothing wrong with being edgy. I am an edgelord myself. So the first message I ever got from them was about how their OC wasn't from Skylands, and that they were a parasite SCP, and they were asking if that was okay, which, again, I'm okay with the questions, but ask them in the server. There was no need for them to DM me. And I was trying to work with them to see if we could possibly do a, compromise, because at that point we hadn't, or at least I didn't understand that the roleplay was going to be multi-fandom. I thought it was strictly Skylanders, so I was trying to be like, hey, maybe we could adapt the character so it is a, part of a species from Skylands, but you can take inspiration from the original SCP. And they just kept going, well, no, it's not a Skylander. No, it's an SCP, it's not from Skylands. And I'm like, well, maybe we could try to adapt it so they are from Skylands. It's like, no. And then he's like, well, Fizzy approved it, so it's okay. It's like, if Fizzy already approved the character, why are you asking me if it's okay? And then later, after attempting to explain some SCP lore to me, which, info dumping, I'm all for. SCP lore is interesting. I didn't really want to talk to him because I have no clue who this dude is, but info dumping is good. And after a little bit in the roleplay, they just mentioned that their character is at the academy, and if I wanted to roleplay in DMs, it's like, I don't really do one-on-one roleplay with people I don't know. I would be okay with roleplaying in the server, but not really one-on-one, and they're just, oh, ... And then again, they later messaged me about revamping their OC, which again is perfectly fine. I just asked them to resubmit the character. And then they're asking questions about another character, and I'm like, I don't understand why you're asking them before you've submitted them, because I have no context. And then they end up going on asking for help for the way the character looks, and if they should describe shark guns. And it's like, please just do that in the submission. We can answer any and all questions through the submission process, which is why the submission process is there, but we need the character first so we know what to help with. And at this point, because I was just a co-mod, all of the okays were ultimately, it was up to Fizzy to basically say whether a character was okay or not, and I could have an opinion on it, but like RuPaul says, the decision is ultimately up to her. But the SCP just continuously kept messaging me about the character, even though, like, I was at an orthodontist appointment at the time. I can tell from the DMs. A little while later, they go, can I post my OC? Which, a completely different OC. I don't know why you're DMing me. Ask on the server. And so I just went, you need the okay from Fizzy. I don't have any control over that. And it's like, you see the character I'm trying to post? Yes. But I have no control over it. Why aren't you asking in the server? And then they ended up leaving from the server, because I don't remember why they left the first time, but then they DM'd me to say they're back, and that Fizzy wasn't responding to them. I'm assuming through DMs, so I just go, well, you could just message them on the server, that would solve the problem. And then they DM me again later, asking if a few of their new OCs had been accepted. I say I don't like discussing things in DMs. Again, it was ultimately not up to me whether the OCs were accepted or not. And that's basically a lot of what happened in the conversation. And then I end up DMing them at one point because they had been DMing other members, which the rules had stated if they're not okay with it, because someone had sent me a message saying that they were sending hateful messages to other members because they didn't understand a reference you made. That was the whole Sonic.exe situation. And they respond, I was just annoyed. Like, seriously, I'm the only odd one out in the server that knows of the references I know of. And it's like, the person you message isn't even taking part in the story you're RPing. They didn't need to know, but even then, keep all discussion with the roleplay in the roleplay server unless, like, explicitly told you can DM them, because I know a lot of people don't like getting random DMs. And then they just go, if you wanted to know what I was referencing, it's Sonic.exe. I know the reference, that doesn't matter in this situation. If it happens again, I'll have to give you a strike. And they go, alright, or actually, and then just left the server. And then came back talking about more SCPs and stuff, and it's like, okay, dude, okay, it's just, And speaking of Spotlight, nice segue. I have had a few run-ins with Spotlight, not in regards to the roleplay server. It was just, like, inconsequential stuff that doesn't matter, but I have had a history with Spotlight before this. We've never really gotten on the best. We weren't, like, enemies. But I was indifferent to them, they were indifferent to me. But one thing I have noticed with Spotlight throughout the course of the roleplay was they didn't like roleplaying with people that were quote-unquote below their skill level, despite it being a roleplay open to anyone and everyone that wanted to join. And I could definitely be reading into this. I just want to say this is all my own opinion. I could definitely be reading way too far into this, because I do have a hard time discerning tone from text. But when it came to Spotlight, it seemed like they turned up their nose at anyone that didn't write copious amounts of paragraphs for every single response, which there's a time and a place for writing a lot of description and a lot of dialogue, and it's not every response. But again, that's just my style, and everybody's style is different, and that's okay. But when you, as discriminate isn't quite the right word, but when you, again, turn your nose up at other people and refuse to roleplay with them, like, there had been moments where they'd ask for a roleplay when the roleplay was slowing down and the main stories weren't happening anymore. And then someone would offer, and they'd be like, I only roleplay with people that write in full paragraphs. And it's like, okay, that's your decision, but you're the one getting pissy that no one is roleplaying, even though people are offering to roleplay with you, but they're not good enough for you. And again, like, it is ultimately your decision, and no one is forcing you to roleplay with anyone. But like, if you wanted to roleplay that bad, there is someone offering to roleplay with you. But I guess not. That was really one of the only negative things about them, I guess. It was just something that stuck out to me. I know it's not the most interesting story out there, and like there probably would have been a lot more happening if like the roleplay had continued and it had been active, but Fizzy had to step down because there was a lot of stuff happening in their life, so when that happened and the server got rebooted because it was just way too cluttered and nobody understood what was happening, so I attempted to streamline things and just nothing has seemed to pick up since, which happens, stuff dies out, it's just the life of a roleplay server. Another frustrating thing I had found is people would pop into the server because it was a public server, so people would join. They'd send one message, like hi or hello or hey. If they didn't immediately get a response back, they would just leave. And it's like, a lot of us have our own stuff going on, we can't just immediately respond, but like, it was just frustrating. And if I ever do host another roleplay server, I may have more stories to tell. But off the top of my head, that is all the ones for this server specifically that I can remember. So yeah, a bit anticlimactic. Nothing like big or anything happened except for the one kid diddler that joined the server. But yeah, that was definitely a story time. So thank you so much, Single Skylanders Roleplay, for joining me on the video. Again, I know it's not the big grand comeback I wanted to have, but it's at least something. And I haven't done one of these storytime videos in a while, and I do want to start making more of them, if my throat will stop giving out. I have probably had to cut out so many coughs from this, I'm extremely sorry if any of them slipped through, but thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll be able to start making videos more regularly. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time I decide to actually post.